Chapter 10 of The Automobile Girls at Newport by Laura Crane. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Enter Gladys and Mr. Townsend. "Why, Gladys LeBaron, this is a surprise," gaily said Grace Carter next afternoon, when the two parties of girls and men had left their automobiles and had come aboard Governor Post's yacht, the Penguin, that lay just outside the New London harbor. Grace was awaiting her turn to be introduced to her host and hostess, when she spied Gladys in a pale blue flannel suit and a cream felt hat, strolling down the deck, looking very much at home. "However did you get here?" queried Grace, smiling. Gladys gave Grace's cheek an affected peck with her lips. "I have a better right to ask that question of you," Gladys pouted. "Only I am not surprised. Harry Townsend came over from New London yesterday and told me you had arrived the night before. He went over with you for the dance, but I didn't feel like going, so he came back early yesterday morning. I am amazed Hugh did not speak of it to you." "Oh, Mr. Post didn't know we had ever heard of Harry Townsend, or you either. We met most unexpectedly, and we had plenty of excitement of our own. I must tell you about it." At this moment Hugh came over for Grace to introduce her to his mother. "This is Miss Carter, mother," he said. "Will you introduce her to Mrs. Irwin? And father, she seems to know Gladys already." Harry Townsend had seen the newcomers and came forward to speak to them with his most charming manner. "Say, Townsend," challenged Hugh, "what made you run away from us? We thought, of course, you'd stay over for the dance. Thought that was your plan in going over to New Haven." Harry turned to Miss Stuart. "I heard of your arrival in New Haven the other evening," he said. "The fellows told me of your experiences, but I got away from the hotel too early next morning to pay my respects." "Then you didn't hear of the burglar, did you?" queried Hugh. In spite of Miss Sallie's protestations, the whole story had to be gone over again. Barbara was talking to Ralph Ewing, and had not looked at Harry Townsend during the conversation until he came over to speak to her. "I have half an idea, Miss Thurston," he said, "that you do not like me, and I am sorry. I was looking forward to having our good times together at Newport, as I am to be Mrs. Ewing's guest, with your cousin, Miss LeBaron. Mrs. Post asked us on for the yacht trip a day or two sooner than we expected. We are all going up to Newport together." "Mr. Townsend," said Barbara, her usually laughing brown eyes now steadfast and serious, "I wonder why you think I do not like you?" "Miss Stuart," begged Mrs. Post, after the governor had conducted the party over his trim little craft, "you must stay and dine with us on board the yacht tonight. I refuse to take no for an answer. I wish I could keep you over until morning, but unfortunately the yacht is too small." Miss Sallie protested. No, they couldn't think of it. They had come aboard only for a call and must get back to their hotel before night. But Hugh swept all her arguments aside. He was an adored only son, and accustomed to having his own way. To tell the truth, Miss Sallie was not averse to the idea of staying. It was pleasant to be meeting Newporters in advance. Miss Stuart was a woman who thought much of appearances and of this world's goods, and their new acquaintances seemed to have plenty of both. "It's an ill wind," she thought to herself, "and I must say for my young niece that she has a habit of falling on her feet." But aloud, Miss Sallie accepted the invitation with much decorum. On the deck aft, where the young people had gathered, there was much laughter. Gladys was really pleased to see Ruth. As for her cousins, they were a bore, but she had no idea of being openly rude to them. She simply meant to ignore them. It was not easy to disregard two such popular girls. Barbara and Mollie seemed to be well able to get on without her patronage. Barbara was already smiling and chattering with Governor Post, while the boys described her mad ride of 2 days before. "Father," said Hugh, "I forgot to introduce you to Miss Thurston by her proper title, Miss Paul Revere." "Harry," asked Gladys, as they stood on the outside of the circle, "don't you think it is disgusting the way that forward cousin of mine always manages to put herself before the public?" "Well," said Mr. Townsend. Was there a little admiration in his tone? "She seems to have plenty of grit." It was really Mollie, not Barbara, who saw through Gladys's treatment of them. Barbara was too open-hearted and boyish to notice a slight, unless it was very marked. Gladys had asked Ruth and Grace to her stateroom, and Mrs. Post had put the other two girls into her unoccupied guest chamber. It was a little gem of a stateroom, upholstered in pale green to relieve the glare from the water. Bah, Molly chuckled, ribbing her cheeks until they were pink. Do you remember the story of the water baby? Yes, Bab answered absently. I do after a fashion. But why do you ask? You haven't turned into a water baby, have you? Just because you are on board a yacht for the first time in your life? No, laughed Molly. I was thinking of the story in it of the salmon and the trout. Have you forgotten it? Of course I have, admitted Barbara. Molly chuckled gleefully. Our high and mighty cousin, Gladys, reminds me very much of the salmon who thought the trout a very common fish and disliked him all the more because he was a relation. Feel like a trout, Pab? Not at all, Molly. But do hurry and go out on deck. That young freshman who came down in the automobile with us to amuse you is wandering around outside, looking frightened to death. You must go and talk to him. As Barbara stepped into the big salon, which was fitted up like a library, she saw one of the young men disappear quickly through the open door. Bab went over to their wraps, which they had dropped in a heap on a couch when they boarded the yacht, and selected her own jacket. Ruth's pocketbook was in full view among their belongings, and Bab covered it over before she went on deck. Before dinner ended, the moon had risen, the pale crescent hanging like a slender jewel in the sky. Barbara was standing alone for a second when Mrs. Irwin approached her. Pardon me, dear, she said, but did you or your sister see a small pin on the dressing table of the guest room when you went in there before dinner? I have misplaced a ruby and diamond circle of no great value. I went into the guest chamber this morning while the maid was cleaning my room, and I thought perhaps I had laid it down in there. No, said Bab, frowning. It did seem curious how losses were following them. I didn't look, although it was probably there. I am most unobservant. I will ask my sister. No, no, said Mrs. Irwin hastily. Please don't. I shall probably find it again. I don't want Mrs. Post to hear. The next morning, when Grace and Ruth were donning their best motor veils and coats, Ruth suddenly looked surprised and began to search hurriedly through her pocketbook. Grace, she said, I can't find $50. I am sure I had it yesterday, because I looked carefully after that wretched burglar had gone, though I knew all my money was safe in my trunk. Now it's gone. Ruth turned her pocketbook upside down. Don't tell Aunt Sallie, please, she begged. I don't know what she would say to have this item added to our adventures. Miss Sallie's voice was heard calling from the next room. Girls, are we or are we not going to Newport today? I, for my part, wish to spend no more time on the way. End of chapter 10.